This is Jay Briscoe here, and you're watching the Wrestling Roundtable, the best damn wrestling show on the whole damn internet. If you ain't watching it, you ain't manning up.
Welcome back to the Wrestling Roundtable. Rejoining our panel is Bret Simonello, as we're going to talk about some of the best and worst build-up to a feud. Now, this is not feuds proper. For instance, Masato Tanaka and Mike Awesome is one of my favorite feuds, if you want to call it that, or series of matches of all time. But we want to talk specifically about, let's say, a storyline or a promotional tactic that made you as a fan really want to see a match. So what were some of the best and worst ways to build up a match to you, Lawrence?
Ric Flair and Terry Funk, right after the greatest match ever. Terry
You're
Funk,
an egg-sucking dog.
You're an egg-sucking dog. And then he pile drove Flair through the table. You didn't need to do anything else. It's one particular angle that was the build-up for a great match.
Ric Flair comes off this great series of Ricky Steamboat, and right in his moment of celebration, he was practically turning face.
Yeah, totally.
Terry Funk comes out and just beats the shit out of him and breaks his neck, and Flair's got to come back later. Didn't he also put a plastic bag over his head? At one
Yeah,
point
there
and
was
try choking
other
him?
murderous tactics there by
Loves the man.
Chainsaw Charlie.
My favorite build up to a match took a whole year to do. Tazz and Sabu. They were not allowed, or they haven't touched each other for literally a whole year. Every week, Tazz would come out and destroy El Puerto Riqueño. And after the match, he would just verbally abuse Sabu. Just, Sabu, where are you? Where are you going to be? The lights would go off a month later. Oh, Sabu's here. The lights go back off again. Oh, he's gone. It was just a great build-up for the whole year. And then they pulled it off with a great match.
It was also very important for the company itself, because being that it was the main event of their first pay-per-view, which they also got publicity on Raw from, it was important to have a big blow-off from two of their biggest original stars on that show as well. And what made it special to me, aside from the tactic of keeping them separate, which was great, it made you want to see it so bad.
You couldn't wait till they ripped each other.
It was one of the few times Sabu spoke. Before he did pedophile shoot interviews and WWE ruined him on TV, one of the times he got in the ring and all he said was one word: Tazz! For a guy who never spoke, this psycho guy to just break that sort of character trait, it was great.
The Outsiders versus Luger, Sting, and Savage at Bash at the Beach '96. Probably one of the greatest build-ups to a match, because not only do you have, Scott Hall and Nash coming in from WWF
And being portrayed as they were coming in
as
from
outsiders,
WWF.
right? Coming from the stand and having this whole company on edge. As a wrestling fan, this is the first time you see a whole company band together against this outside force.
Yeah, heels and faces.
Yeah, it turned first to start as a subplot and then became like the main thing that was going on for WCW. And you had the variable of who's the third guy with the announcers and the whole roster. Everyone is just on edge the whole pay-per-view, and I thought it was a great build-up.
There was a lot of intrigue politically at the time as well, because not just Bret Hart, but also all the people that were already in WCW.
Like Luger and
Sting.
Yeah.
Hogan had been off TV after being seduced by Kevin Sullivan, like I am. And all these people coming in, who's it going to be? It was really a good build. And also the outsiders showing up, not just as the characters in WWF, but security stopping them with the ball bats.
They didn't jump in the ring and attack them, and that was their first match back in WCW. So that was, a good promotional tactic too.
And it set the tone for how they were going to do the NWO storyline with, like you said, suspense and intrigue and this nervous aura that was going to be who's going to join them next and how do we stop them. And you had the beatdowns and the police and all this kind of stuff.
It was really the turning point in WCW from what they were doing before and then what they did after.
When you mentioned on the last show, Bret, that you really liked the Dibiase Savage tournament final at WrestleMania 4, it put it back in my mind how it really did start the Hogan-Savage feud a year ahead of time, back when they would actually plan things, not just on a napkin, but they would start teaming. And then the jealousy would come in, and a year later in the same building, it was
Mega
blown
powers
off.
explode.
It was just wonderful build-up over a year, because fans at first were like, cool, two of our favorite guys are teaming up. And the way Savage turned on him.
I really believe Savage hates his guts.
Savage is a psycho, man.
In that medical room in the back on Saturday's Night
classic.
Live,
Oh
where
my
he
God, that
freaked
was
out. I
great.
thought he was going to stab him with like a needle. I really thought he was going to kill him. That was awesome.
Brother, watch
Plus,
Elizabeth. For screw him.
remember, they had really built up Savage and Elizabeth. He was like abusive to her. Then he turned face. He was the gentleman, and now he's starting to be jealous. And so when he finally flipped out, it was scary, like for her too. So it really built up that match.
Speaking of Savage, though, I remember as a kid when I was first starting to watch, the feud that really got a reaction out of me a lot was Jake the Snake Roberts when he turned heel on Randy Savage. the stuff he would do.
Even the snake bite.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that was scary. I can't watch that now.
Yeah.
It's a lot different species-wise and size-wise from the python that he had used. This is the
A King Cobra.
reputable,
King Cobra.
poisonous King Cobra.
Which
And
kind of like represented his character at that
They
time.
had that close-up shot of the cobra.
You see the blood?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
blood was
How did they
coming
do
out.
that? Was
Oh,
awesome.
and then he slapped her on Tuesday in Texas.
Oh my God.
You don't lay your hands on a woman, even if you're Chris
Not as-
Brown. I mean Jericho. He slapped Elizabeth, and I had my magazine. I was like, Jake the Snake, he turned so evil, and I couldn't wait to see.
And don't forget the wedding. They had the snake in one of the gifts.
In a brilliant promotional tactic, Savage was retired at the time,
Yeah.
and they had the call Jack Tunney's hotline and
Hey,
reinstate
1, 2,
Savage.
3, 4, reinstate the Macho Man.
Right
whatever
after
it
their
was.
wedding at the Garden, match made in
Yes.
heaven,
I was
match
there
made in
for that.
hell. Brilliant.
It was brilliant.
Bret and Goldberg. It didn't turn out the way he wanted to, but that first angle they did in Canada with the spear.
The Clint Eastwood angle, as I call it.
I wanted to see them start that feud, and WCW had bombed with so many of the big feuds.
It was the
with their
first
98
big moment
roster.
Bret had in WCW.
It really was,
Yeah.
and it was like, wow, that's going to be cool because Goldberg hasn't had a challenge like that yet. He beat Hogan. He hasn't really fought like the wrestler's wrestler, and Bret hasn't really established himself as the wrestler's wrestler in WCW. So this could be cool. And they had some good matches later on. Rock Hogan. And the reason I bring that one up with Bret Goldberg is because those are two feuds that the build-up really was one segment. And everything else they did was kind of, like
Unnecessary?
Yeah, like Hogan didn't have to kill Rock
Yeah.
after. I mean, that added to it in some way the night of, but after that, nobody really cares
Well, the
about that.
handicap match with Hogan and Outsiders against Rock and Austin,
In theory,
the
could
Raw
have
before
been the main
WrestleMania was
event.
awesome.
Yeah, it was, but it wasn't really necessary for the build-up of Hogan Rock.
Well, Hogan Rock, the NWO beatdown afterwards was cool, and the truck they tried killing him.
but
and
that was
everything.
like resurrecting the NWO stuff. We only needed that looking at each other, looking at the fans.
Yeah.
we didn't.
That was my
They said
favorite.
it all.
We didn't even necessarily need it. The stare down was enough.
That was amazing.
Roddy Piper and Bad News Brown. When Roddy
God.
Piper just developed, he just went nuts, and he painted his whole half of his thing black. We don't understand why, but he was just insane.
He could never won Money in the Bank.
I think that answer is insane.
He was just insane. But also with Roddy Piper, the Virgil and the $1 Million Man,
Yes,
training
That's
him and
different.
Virgil. Everybody's pulling behind Virgil, even though really Virgil, who wants to see him do anything?
WrestleMania 1 main event and all the amazing build-up from so many perspectives. They were not only building up that match and WrestleMania 1, they were building up what the WWF was going to
future.
be in the 80s. They were on TV shows, Mr. T and Hogan, and they were training in Central Park, and then they had this unbelievably awesome promo with Orndorff and Piper training. It's really classic stuff.
Well, that's Piper's shtick for the last 2 decades. I kicked Mr. T and Cindy Lauper all in one night, blah, blah, blah.
I'm going to go with another match in the Garden. Bret and Austin for Survivor Series 96. The
Oh.
young gun, the new blood, challenging the former champion who supposedly ran away after he got screwed out of the title. And it was Bret's comeback match. Austin was hot at the time. A new character for the WWF.
He was really brutal to Pillman.
Especially the vignette, the black and white with Austin.
You put the S in front of Hitman, and that's my opinion of
That
I
was
thought-
the real beginning of the Attitude
yeah,
Era.
it
Because they
was.
really started to kind of imply that Bret's coming back, and this guy's been here, and he's been doing it, and he wants to kick your ass. And WrestleMania 13 was the real change, but
Yeah.
that was the beginning.
That was the beginning. Great match, too.
Speaking of Austin, Highway to Hell of 98, SummerSlam 98.
Another Garden match.
Another Garden match, but it was also the first time that I remember WWF really putting a song as an identity onto a feud and shooting at the Trax warehouse with the fire and everything. Plus the intrigue of Kane and Undertaker. Are they working together? Maybe, maybe not.
Right.
And the great reveals that Russo would come up with where Kane's in the Undertaker's outfit, but he turns around and it's the mask. That got me excited, and hopefully you've been excited listening to the conversation, because when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the worst build-ups.
Foley Flair, I thought was a bad build-up, too.
The match was
Six?
bad too.
Oh,
The
the
match
match.
was
Everything was
bad. Everything was bad.
was horrible.
Everything was bad about that entire feud.
First of all, the roles should have been reversed. Foley's going off, going deep about
Oh,
him.
it was completely one-sided.
Exactly.
Foley would say, "You're wrong for this, this, that, and that," and Flair would be like,
What?
"No,
Come on! Come out here!
Foley would come out and do announcing during Flair's matches. He'd
They
be
didn't have to bring the
He
lead
says
in.
all I can do is rely on stunts. So I'm gonna come out and wrestle a technical masterpiece. I'm gonna stink up the place.
way to advertise this
Yeah.
match is going to suck."
On pay-per-view. Yeah, let's. Yeah, I'm gonna spend $40 on this now.
So having it at Vengeance.
Didn't they do it SummerSlam?
Yeah, but they did it as a pay-per-view before too, which had like a 1 week build-up.
Welcome back to the Wrestling Roundtable. I'm your host, Eric Santamaria. Joining us on our panel once again is Chris Harris. And you and I met in video class, Rodney, a long time ago. A lot of us have experience doing something artistic, creative, like video, music, and other sort of things like that. In terms of build-up, has there ever been a video package, let's say, that you've really got excited from, that you wanted to see a match afterwards?
The Sting hero videos from WCW.
Which have been ruined on 24/7.
Like everything with music has been. Not only because that song was in Short Circuit too. Really great, cheesy, heroic. They're showing Sting repel, it's black and white, and they show him in the rafters, and it made me like, I want to see him. He's got to kill Hogan.
It was right at the beginning of him starting to paint his face white like the Crow.
Yeah.
It really helped emphasize the change that this character was going through at the time. So thanks for your input. Chris?
The Bret Hart Shawn Michaels videos leading up to WrestleMania 12. I could not wait to see that Iron Man match. After watching that stuff, and you see Bret running down the street, and he's training with Stu in the dungeon. Phenomenal. I couldn't wait to see that match.
Brock Rock from SummerSlam '92, right along those lines,
Right.
showing them training, showing Brock with the log, and showing him doing the amateur wrestling sit-outs, and Rock going back to his football training, because these are two NCAA athletes main eventing a big pay-per-view for a belt. Brock was coming up at the time. Rock was about to be out. Great build-up led to a great match.
What's great about those is it not only emphasizes the athleticism of the wrestlers and the realistic athletic sport atmosphere that they should probably have leaned forward to years ago, it also made it seem more real in that when they cut from The Rock doing the football sprints and then running the ropes, doing the jumps on the boxes and then to the leapfrogs, it makes sense.
Exactly. They concentrated more on the athleticism. Who is the best athlete instead of, Brock attacked Rock and
his
then Rock
girlfriend.
attacked Brock and then
when
Heyman's
Brock broke
involved.
into Rock's house with his sledgehammer.
We will be getting to that, I'm sure. The opening of Judgment Day 2000 with the Iron Man, everything that could happen in an hour was pretty neat. But when I was a kid, Hogan and Slaughter had a video on maybe Superstars before WrestleMania 7 that summarized the whole feud. No words, no sound bites, nothing like they do now where they solarize every 12 camera shots of boom, boom. It was so dramatic, so emotional, and it made me want to see Hogan kill
With the
Sergeant
burning of
Slaughter.
the American flag.
That wasn't the flag, it was the Hulk still
Oh,
rules.
right, yes.
For worst, Vengeance 2001.
Oh, wow.
What the fuck was that about? Old film style with Freddie Blassie dancing in fast motion with clowns. What the fuck does that have to do with Undisputed
Well,
Championship?
if you figure you're going to end the invasion, which was a disaster, you might as well just make it a cartoon. And
Speaking of invasion, we're going to talk about some of the worst build-ups for wrestling. I think we just need to say invasion and move
Sure.
on. So what do you think were some of the worst build-ups?
Eddie Guerrero versus Rey Mysterio during the summer of 2005. Holy shit, was that terrible. With this whole crap involving Dominick. We're going to have a ladder match for my son.
I'm your poppy.
I'm your poppy.
The
Come on.
t-shirts were great.
Rather than adoption papers, why don't you just hang the kid above the ring? Have them fight for him.
That feud, which was great the first time in WCW, really emphasized to me how stupid WWE thinks we as fans are
Yep.
when they have a kid who looks exactly like Rey Mysterio, but it's Eddie's kid for real. Yeah, sure.
Triple H and Kane from No Mercy 02.
That-
These guys, all right?
you had to go there.
They're combining, they're unifying the world title with the Intercontinental title, and they're focusing on Kane killing a girl, Katie Vick. Come on, first of all, Kane was not built up as this party animal when he was a kid. He is a guy who came out from
Party
the fire,
animal.
from the ruins, who were
Kane with
coming
a
to get his
varsity
revenge.
jacket driving his blue
Yeah.
Chevy.
That's whenever Paul Bear would let him out of the basement, apparently.
Yeah.
HBK and Vince and DX and anything in 2006 that had Shawn Michaels and Triple H in it.
You mean God? I mean Triple H, of course.
It was offensive, but it was stupid. All you need to say is that they've had a really controversial relationship, as like Hogan and Vince did. And you can maybe bring in some of the stuff about the Montreal Screwjob and Michael's role, all the things that they always go to. But no, you have to make it that we don't like that Michael says, well, let's just talk about church. And God, like, what are you doing? Like,
Speaking of Triple H, and we were talking to the build-up of WrestleMania a
And
few
speaking of
shows
God,
ago.
right.
Speaking of God, Orton and Triple H, I think in every incarnation we've seen of it, which has been for pretty much every year since 2005, has sucked every time. First, Orton gets turned on by Evolution. So it's not even like he wanted to leave, like they successfully and greatly built up Batista to leave afterwards as their backup plan, I suppose. Batista turn was great. People loved it. They were anticipating it, and it blew off great. Orton, on the other hand, turned into the chicken shit who popped out of birthday cakes and ran away, and then he loses immediately. Then, this year, the segment with Stephanie was good.
Well, the first segment where he kicked Vince, and then the segment they did right before.
When Shane beat his ass.
Did you like when the three McMahons came out together and beat
Oh
up the
my
cops?
God.
My favorite people.
That was great.
But the segment where he DDT'd Stephanie while Triple H was handcuffed to the ropes
Yeah,
and kissed her,
brilliant.
that was
great
I
drama.
have to say.
Yeah.
If it was more like that, instead of Triple H breaks into his house and the ratings go down every week.
It's ridiculous because it feels like they just have to top themselves when they go back to this feud
It's
every single
stupid.
year.
Except
Like
for the matches.
WrestleMania 26 is going to be like Orton opens fire with a gun in the parking lot on Triple H but misses.
Rock and Goldberg from 2003 Backlash. They started off good with Goldberg coming out spearing Rock. After that, it turned to
The
shit.
card and start.
Goldberg was getting beat up every other week, and what a shitty way to bring Goldberg in. I knew from there it's going to be a waste.
It was practically a one-man show where Rock had a concert and he'd sing for 10 minutes, and then Goldberg would come out and get beat with a chair. That's great build-up.
Yeah.
And he also didn't even get his revenge on Gilbert. You can't even do that. Gilbert comes out, and then The Rock
No, he
breaks in
must
with-
be buried completely because he's from WCW.
And we didn't even mention the wig people.
Bret and Hogan on Nitro. They just did Bret and Hogan on Nitro to turn Bret to the NWO. There was no build-up. They had like the match that everybody wanted to see. We're going to finally bring Bret to WCW. We're finally going to do Bret and Hogan. They didn't even do it on a pay-per-view. And it was used as a way to bury Bret. Like, it's so evil.
DDP versus The
Oh,
Undertaker.
God. That's all you have to say.
Watching your wife, Undertaker.
The guy takes his mask off and is supposed to represent WCW finally on WWF TV after the invasion. But no, you talk about this all the time.
This is another instance where they think we are just really stupid. When DDP took off his mask on that Raw, when he came out on the motorcycle, every fan forgot for a few seconds that, oh, he's the stalker of Undertaker's wife. They went, holy shit, it's DDP.
Everybody
They
does.
did this, they were chanting DDP, and then he had to cut his stupid promo about Sarah,
yeah.
and everyone was like, oh, this shit. Because if they know that much about DDP to be excited that he's here, they know he's with Kimberly, and Kimberly's a hell of a lot better looking than Sarah, so why would he even bother? Speaking of around that time frame, about a year later, Stone Cold Steve Austin and Scott Hall. This is how you build up Scott Hall. He gets kidnapped by Steve Austin with duct tape. They hit Austin in the leg with a cinder block, and then he's walking around the next day fine on SmackDown. When he shoots Scott Hall with a
The
net.
net. Remember Nash? He's got a gun. He's got a gun.
Those are just examples of how stupid they think we are. But we think better of you. We don't think you're stupid, and that's why you're watching the show. Send us your thoughts and opinions. We'd like to hear some of the gaps that we missed filled in by you, the fans. And also, stay tuned for next week on the Wrestling Roundtable. Daisy Hayes from Ring of Honor and Shimmer will be joining us to talk about women in wrestling. And we're also going to talk about some of the funniest and least funniest moments in wrestling as well. So for the panel, Martin and Rodney LeConte, Chris Harris, Brett Simonello, Lawrence Haber, I'm your host, Eric Santamaria. Thank you and join us next week.